Hey gang, it's James coming on to talk about the Bible. That's what I do. Occasionally I talk history, politics, world events. I don't do that so much anymore because we can't change it, right? So anyway, here I am tonight talking about the branch. And first off, I can see the lighting is kind of poor, so I apologize for that. But you're not tuning in to see my beautiful face. You're tuning in to hear the words out of this book. So we're just going to let that go and hope the audio's fine. So last month, just to give you some background on what I've been doing here, okay? I live in Pennsylvania, for those of you that didn't know, and for about the past year or so, I have had the blessing and the opportunity and the privilege to teach at a local fellowship that we have here, different capacities, okay? We have a smaller home fellowship, and then we have like a more regional kind of thing where, home fellowships kind of get together, okay? I've had the privilege to teach it in both scenarios, as have other men in the area, okay? So it's not just me, thankfully. So, anyway, so starting last year, or was it? It was earlier this year. I think it was earlier this year. I started teaching. I presented what I call the Galatians 3 gospel, okay? And which I have some news about that, which I'll try to remember to get to at the end of this as kind of a tag for later. And then kind of stemming off of that, I did a 2-part study there on the second Exodus, and did a 2-part study on, what was it? Was it second Exodus? Yeah, second Exodus, the gospel, and then just kind of launched into some stuff specific to the Messiah, okay? So to kind of bring it more recent, last month, I did a teaching, which I presented here on Facebook later, on the Good Shepherd, okay? And kind of this general theme that I have of, okay, what we've been taught in the Christian churches is not completely wrong, but it's not completely right either, okay? So like, when I talk about the gospel that's been presented in Christianity over the past almost 2,000 years, I don't think is a completely false gospel. I view it as an incomplete gospel. So my objective is to flesh it all out, and I pull heavily from the Old Testament to do so, because that's the foundation for everything. And so, same thing with the Good Shepherd. That study, I went from, beyond the personal shepherd that we all know and love into the one that shepherds all of Israel. Okay? That's a role of the Messiah that very seldom gets talked about, if ever, in the churches, and doesn't get talked about much even out here in the world of Hebrew roots Messianic people. Okay? So the branch is another aspect of that. Okay, to kind of put this into perspective, how few people teach this, at least that I've seen with these two eyes. I went on YouTube, because YouTube is full of like millions and millions of videos. Pretty much anything you want to find, you can find on YouTube. And I just thought, well, let me see what kind of teachings are out there, either on the Jewish side or the Christian side, about the branch, about this concept of the branch in the scriptures. There were maybe a couple of them, like seriously, like literally 2 that popped up, and it's just kind of like real basic cursory kind of stuff. Most of what came up was talking about Waco, the Branch Davidians, David Koresh, and all that thing. Okay, so almost no content out there deep diving on the branch. So I feel like there's a serious lack in the body of Messiah of understanding this aspect of his messianic anointing. Okay, so we're going to deep dive this evening. This is going to be long. It's going to be over an hour. So bear with me. If you can't sit it in one chunk, feel free to come back later. Whatever you need to do. If this goes well, I'll try to get it up on the YouTube channel at some point for those of you that are interested in that. Anyway, so the branch. I'm going to start off in Isaiah. I have 6 scriptures to read, but they're big chunks. They're all in the Old Testament. Isaiah, Jeremiah, Zechariah. That's it. Okay, to establish this concept. I'm going to start with the oldest writings and go to the more recent writings. Line upon line, precept upon precept. And hopefully by the time I'm done with this, we'll be able to say, whoa, that's what the Messiah is supposed to be doing? Why haven't I been taught that? It's a question that I had when I first saw this. And it's not like it's hidden from us. It's there in the text. But the problem is I think people just gloss over it. Because this kind of stuff deals with more of the role, like the Good Shepherd, of corporate salvation. Saving the whole nation of Israel. And by that I don't mean by blood or by geographic territory. I mean by faith. Okay, Romans 11 Israel. That's who's going to be saved. That's the greater mission of the Messiah. Our personal salvation factors into that, yes. But it doesn't stop with keeping my butt out of hell. Okay, it goes way beyond that. So let's get started. We're going to start in the book of Isaiah. I'm going to read 3 whole chapters. How's that for an opening salvo? 3 whole chapters in the book of Isaiah to kind of get rolling on this. And some of this I'm going to read and you're going to be like, is he ever going to get to the branch? I will. But I need to read these big chunks to establish the context in which the branch is revealed and functions. Okay? Context is key. It's everything here. We can't just read 2 or 3 verses here and there to talk about the branch and hope to have any kind of understanding of who he is and what he does. Shalom, brother. Good to see you on. Okay, so I don't normally see people on in real time. This is pretty cool. Normally I just find out. I think I can see, like, because it shares the story, I can see who watches the story, but I can't hardly ever see who actually watches the video. So that's cool to see you on, brother. Thank you for tuning in. Okay, so Isaiah chapter 2. The word which Isaiah the son of Amos saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem. Now it will come about that in the last days, pause a moment, there's our time marker, the last days. Okay, so this is not talking almost always exclusively when the last days, or we'll see this phrase come up later, in that day, at that time, almost always when that happens, unless the text specifies otherwise, that's talking about the very end of the age, not near future from when it was prophesied. So he's not talking, this is Isaiah, he's not talking about during the life of Isaiah. He's not talking about later on during the life of Jeremiah. He's not talking about Second Temple Judah. He's talking about the end, in the last days. That's the context of this. And remember, we're going to get into the branch, but it's in this context respective to time. It will come about that in the last days, the mountain of the house of Yahweh will be established as the chief of the mountains, and will be raised above the hills, and all the nations, or dare we say, Gentiles, will stream to it. And many peoples will come and say, come, let us go up to the mountain of Yahweh, to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us concerning his ways, and that we may walk in his paths. Now here's the question. This is last days. This is the nations. Why do they need to come to the house of Yahweh, to the mountain of Yahweh, where Yahweh apparently is at this time, to learn about his ways, if they have been taught accurately about his ways for the past millennia? Does anyone stop to think about that? If Christians and Jews were doing a good enough job of teaching the people the ways of Yahweh all this time historically, there would be no need for the nations to come and learn them later in the last days. This is an indictment on our fathers who have failed to do this, guys. I know that's hard to hear, but it's the truth. Let's keep going. For the law will go forth from Zion. And that's Torah in the Hebrew, so there's no ambiguity here. The Torah will go forth from Zion, this mountain of Yahweh, where the Gentiles are coming in to learn about his ways. The law is going to go forth. This is last days. Why would his law go forth from Zion in the last days if it wasn't to teach these Gentiles his ways? But yet we, for whatever reason, think that we're out from under this stuff right now. It's irrelevant, yada, yada, yada. Let's continue. And the word of Yahweh from Jerusalem, verse 4. And he will judge between the nations, and will render decisions for many peoples. And they will hammer their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. That's how we know this is last days, because that has never happened. Has historically never happened. This is completely unfulfilled prophecy. Okay? So let's keep going. Nation will not lift up its sword against nation, and never again will they learn war. Amen. Hallelujah. Guys, I cannot wait for that day. Hopefully you can't either. Come, house of Jacob, and let us walk in the light of Yahweh. For you have abandoned your people, the house of Jacob, because they are filled with influences from the east. That's interesting. Who's the house of Jacob? The family of Jacob? Who's the family of Jacob? Jacob is Israel. So it's Israel. It's another way of saying Israel. They're filled with influences from the east. They are soothsayers, like the Philistines, and they strike bargains with the children of foreigners. Now I know that some of this is kind of controversial. It shouldn't be, but it is. Look at the church today. Look at the Eastern influences. You've got Pentecostal charismatic churches right now doing Kundalini yoga, rolling around on the ground, barking like dogs and screeching like owls, and literally having orgasms, saying it's the Holy Spirit. Their land has also been filled with silver and gold, and there is no end to their treasuries. Their land has been filled with horses, and there is no end to their chariots. Sounds like the American military-industrial complex to me. Their land has also been filled with idols. Ooh, idols. They worship the work of their hands, that which their fingers have made. So the common man has been humbled, and the man of importance has been abased, but do not forgive them. You know what's interesting? When we go to the second commandment, the one that forbids idolatry, we're not supposed to make anything. We're not supposed to make images of anything in the heavens above, on the earth, or underneath the earth. That pretty much covers anything, right? So basically nothing. We're not supposed to make images of anything and worship them. Go around to any town in America. It's really easy to do. You will see thousands upon thousands of objects that were made with people's hands to represent things in heaven or on earth or even under the earth, and they're worshipped. What does worship mean? Worship means to prostrate, to bow down to show that you are subservient to. The thing you're bowing down to or the person you're bowing down to is superior to you. I love my Catholic brothers and sisters, but this is a problem. I know it's hard. I know it's a hard truth, but it's the truth all the same. When you look at the Catholic 10 Commandments, what they did, they split up the last commandment, the 10th commandment, into 2 commandments. So to round out the count of 10 and took out the second commandment. If you walk into a Catholic church or if you open up a Catholic Bible and they have a copy of the 10 Commandments, you won't see a peep about idolatry. None. That's pretty telling to me. Why would you do that? Maybe because your churches are full of idols and you don't want people to connect. Maybe we shouldn't be doing this. And this is creeping into the Christian churches. Well, Catholics are Christians. The Protestant churches. I just realized saying Catholics are Christians is going to really bother a lot of you, but it's true. Catholics and Protestants are all Christians. So anyway, Obama, when he was in office, carried around an idol in his pocket. Now, there's debate. Was he Muslim? Was he Christian? Doesn't matter. Muslims forbid idolatry too. Either way, what's he doing with an idol in his pocket? And you could just go on and on and on. Verse 10, enter the rock and hide in the dust from the terror of Yahweh and from the splendor of his majesty. The proud look of man will be abased, and the loftiness of man will be humbled, and Yahweh alone will be exalted in that day. So he's talking about people entering the rock and hiding in the dust. Sounds a lot like what we read in Revelations. The kings of the earth hid in the rocks, right? Verse 12, for Yahweh of hosts will have a day of reckoning against everyone who is proud and lofty, against everyone who is lifted up, that he may be abased. And it will be against all the cedars of Lebanon that are lofty and lifted up, against all the oaks of Bashan. Let's pause a moment. He's not literally judging trees here. This is symbolic language meant to represent people with power. Against all the lofty mountains, against all the hills that are lifted up, against every high tower, against every fortified wall, against all the ships of Tarshish, and against all the beautiful craft. The pride of man will be humbled, and the loftiness of men will be abased. And Yahweh alone will be exalted in that day. But the idols will completely vanish. Men will go into caves of the rock. I'm back. My phone acted up there. That was kind of weird. Let me just go back. Verse 19, in case it skipped. Verse 19. Men will go into caves of the rocks and into holes of the ground before the terror of Yahweh and the splendor of his majesty, when he arises to make the earth tremble. In that day men will cast away to the moles and to the bats their idols of silver and their idols of gold, which they made for themselves to worship, in order to go into the caverns of the rocks and the clefts of the cliffs, before the terror of Yahweh and the splendor of his majesty. When he arises to make the earth tremble, stop regarding man, whose breath of life is in his nostrils, for why should he be esteemed? Pretty heavy stuff, right? Chapter 3. For behold, Yahweh Elohim of hosts, or your English will say Lord God of hosts, is going to remove from Jerusalem and Judah both supply and support. Remember, this is last days. This is last days. People that think that Jerusalem and Israel, modern day Israel, is just going to become this utopia, right? This Zionist utopia, and Jerusalem's going to be the capital of the world and all this kind of stuff. That's coming, but we've got some stuff happening first that a lot of people don't want to admit. This is part of it. Both the supply and support, the whole supply of bread and the whole supply of water. The mighty man and the warrior, the judge and the prophet, the diviner and the elder, the captain of 50 and the honorable man, the counselor and the expert artisan, and the skillful enchanter. Why do we have skillful enchanters in Jerusalem in the last days? And I will make mere lads their princes, and capricious children will rule over them. And the people will be oppressed, each one by another, and each one by his neighbor. The youth will storm against the elder, and the inferior against the honorable. When a man lays hold of his brother in his father's house, saying, "You have a cloak, you shall be our ruler, and these ruins will be under your charge," he, the brother, will protest on that day, saying, "I will not be your healer, for in my house there's neither bread nor cloak. You should not appoint me ruler of the people." So nobody's going to want to lead the people. Nobody's going to be worthy to lead the people. For Jerusalem has stumbled and Judah has fallen, because their speech and their actions are against Yahweh. Their speech. Speech is what comes out of your mouth. What decides what you say? Your mind. Right? And their actions, their deeds, their hand. Their forehead, their hand. It's that same idea. Our words, our thoughts are all connected, and then our actions. Their speech and their actions are against Yahweh, to rebel against his glorious presence. The expression of their faces bears witness against them, and they display their sin like Sodom. If that doesn't sound familiar, I don't know what to tell you. They don't even conceal it. Woe to them, for they have brought evil on themselves. Say to the righteous, which is hopefully me and you, that it will go well with them, for they will eat the fruit of their actions. Woe to the wicked, which is hopefully not you and I. It will go badly with him, for what he deserves will be done to him. Oh, my people, their oppressors are children, and women rule over them. Oh, my people, those who guide you lead you astray, and confuse the direction of your paths. Man, this sounds Really familiar, guys. Really familiar. And this is last days stuff. It does kind of make you wonder, maybe we're in the last days. Verse 13. Yahweh arises to contend and stands to judge the people. Yahweh enters into judgment with the elders and princes of his people. It is you who have devoured the vineyard. The plunder of the poor is in your houses. What do you mean by crushing my people and grinding the face of the poor? Declares Yahweh, God of hosts. Moreover, Yahweh said, because the daughters of Zion are proud. Now, think about this. The daughters of Zion. He just said earlier that the law was going to go forth from Zion. But in this moment that he's talking about, we're not even close. The daughters of Zion are proud and walk with heads held high and seductive eyes. Yeah, we see that all the time, don't we? The cosmetics industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Women putting toxic chemicals on their faces thinking it's going to make them beautiful, denying that the beauty was already put there by the Creator. And they go along with mincing steps. Mincing steps, what does that mean? Mincing steps is a polite way of saying they shake their booty when they walk. Right? And tinkle the bangles on their feet. Therefore, Yahweh will afflict the scalp of the daughters of Zion with scabs, and Yahweh will make their foreheads bare. In that day, Yahweh will take away the beauty of their anklets, headbands, crescent ornaments, dangling earrings, bracelets, veils, headdresses, ankle chains, sashes, perfume, amulets, finger rings, nose rings, festal robes, outer tunics, cloaks, money purses, hand mirrors, undergarments, turbans, and veils. All of this lady stuff, right? It's going to be taken away. My video looks a little bit glitchy here, so hopefully I don't lose connection. I had a pretty strong connection earlier. Hopefully that holds out. Now it will come about that instead of sweet perfume, there will be putrefaction. Instead of a belt, a robe. Instead of well-set hair, a plucked-out scalp. Instead of fine clothes, a donning of sackcloth. And branding instead of beauty. Your men will fall by the sword, and your mighty ones in battle. And her gates will lament and mourn, and deserted she will sit on the ground. So, we're going to get into something here in chapter 4. This is relevant. By the time this is all done, okay, these women are going to be judged, but the men are going to be judged too. The men are going to be wiped out in war. That's the context here for what we're about to read in chapter 4. Now, for 7 women will take hold of one man in that day. Why? Because there aren't any men left. Saying, we will eat our own bread and wear our own clothes, only let us be called by your name. Take away our reproach. So these are women who want a man, basically to be the head of their household, but there just aren't enough men. There's not enough men around. In that day, the branch of Yahweh will be beautiful and glorious. This is the first mention of the branch. And the fruit of the earth will be the pride and the adornment of the survivors of Israel. The survivors of Israel. I'm going to take a short sidebar here and talk about the remnant. Everyone wants to be called the remnant. We're the remnant church. What does that really mean? It means you believe that you are the minority because a remnant's a small group. You know, like when you make a dress, the remnants are the scraps of fabric left over. They're a lot smaller than what was made into the dress. Okay? Everybody wants to be that remnant. And everybody that thinks they're the remnant believes they're the remnant because they have the truth. We're the small group of people that's maintained the truth ever since the truth was given. It hasn't changed. It's completely unadulterated. When you read about the remnant, it's almost always in this context of survivors, the ones who are left over after judgment. So, no, you're not the remnant church. Neither am I. We're not at that stage yet. Verse 3, it will come about that he who is left in Zion and remains in Jerusalem will be called holy, everyone who is recorded for life in Jerusalem. So whoever survives this judgment is going to be called holy. When Yahweh has washed away the filth of the daughters of Zion and purged the bloodshed of Jerusalem from her midst by the spirit of judgment and the spirit of burning, then Yahweh will create over the whole area of Mount Zion and over her assemblies a cloud by day, even smoke, and the brightness of a flaming fire by night. For over all the glory will be a canopy. There will be a shelter to give shade from the heat by day, and refuge and protection from the storm and the rain. So this is the first mention of the branch. It took 3 chapters to get here. And I could keep going because the context continues. He's still in this same vision. But in that day, the branch of Yahweh will be beautiful and glorious. It doesn't really say what that is. Like, in the context here, there's nothing that actually says, anything about this having a messianic context to it or anything. Now, it's interesting enough. I don't know if all translations are like this, but my Zondervan New American Standard 1995 edition has the branch capitalized as a proper noun. So whoever wrote the Lockwood Foundation, I think, did the NASB, their translators obviously saw the branch here and thought, that's the Messiah. We need to capitalize that. So they're familiar with the concept of the branch, right? But let's keep going, and let's kind of see what else we're missing. My screensaver went on. I've got to get back in here. Bear with me just a moment. I don't have a hard copy like I normally do. Okay, so let's fast forward to Isaiah chapter 10. Isaiah chapter 10. We're going to read some more chapters here. We're going to go from 10 into 12. Okay? Now, the nice thing about doing this with a group is you can pass the reading around. So, you poor people, if you're watching this live, get to hear yours truly and my sleepy-sounding voice, apparently, for just however long this takes. So, anyway, thank you for that. Thank you for putting up and being patient with me. Isaiah chapter 10, we're going to start in verse 20. Now, in that day, this is still in the context of the last days, just in case you're wondering. I'm picking up kind of in the middle here. This vision started earlier. Okay, if I read the whole entire context, we'd be here like 3 hours. All right? So I'm trying to kind of condense this without diluting the point. In that day, the remnant, remember we talked about the remnant. This is the survivors. The remnant of Israel and those of the house of Jacob who have escaped will never again rely on the one who struck them, but will truly rely on Yahweh, the Holy One of Israel. A remnant will return, the remnant of Jacob, to the mighty God. For though your people, O Israel, may be like the sand of the sea, only a remnant within them will return. A destruction is determined, overflowing with righteousness. Now, how does a destruction overflow with righteousness? I talked about it last night. Righteousness is basically just the state of doing the right thing. So, overflowing with righteousness, this is like the most right thing that could happen. In other words, this judgment could not be more deserved. Verse 23, for a complete destruction, one that is decreed, Yahweh God of hosts will execute in the midst of the whole land. Therefore, thus says Yahweh God of hosts, O my people who dwell in Zion, do not fear the Assyrian who strikes you with the rod and lifts up his staff against you the way Egypt did. I want to pause a moment. It's really easy to look at this and say like, oh, the Assyrian. Well, this already happened. Right? The Assyrians, Sennacherib, and all those guys back then, Tiglath-Pileser, the ones that were, that had Hezekiah and Ahaz terrified. But again, we're in the context of the last days. So there are Bible scholars who are waking up to the idea that this Assyrian could either be the beast, the Antichrist, a type of that, whatever. But it's not the old Assyrian that was dealt with, long ago. This is something new in the last days, but it's being referred to as the Assyrian. Now, we know that there's precedence for this because in Isaiah's day, the Assyrian was the problem. Emmanuel, right? That whole prophecy was to comfort the king Ahaz about the potential domination of the king of Assyria, allied with the king of the north, the king of the northern kingdom, Ephraim. Okay, so it's a very real thing temporally here, but we're in the context of the last days. So you can't just say, oh, well, that was the fulfillment of this. So let's continue. This is really fascinating. Okay, I preach a lot about the idea that the second Exodus is going to look like the first Exodus. So anything we see in the first Exodus, we need to keep that in our back pockets when we start talking about second Exodus later. And we're going to kind of get into some of that language here. Okay, so remember, we're clearly after the first Exodus, and we're in a last days context. Therefore, thus says, okay, I already read that. No, let me go back. Verse 24, therefore, thus says Yahweh, God of hosts, O my people who dwell in Zion, do not fear the Assyrian who strikes you with the rod and lifts up his staff against you, the way Egypt did. For in a very little while my indignation against you will be spent, and my anger will be directed to their destruction. Yahweh of hosts will arouse a scourge against him like the slaughter of Midian at the rock of Oreb, and his staff will be over the sea. His staff will be over the sea, and he will lift it up the way he did in Egypt. Wait a minute. Why? If I'm interpreting this literally, there's some serious imagery going on here, guys. Some serious dots to connect. So it will be in that day that his burden will be removed from your shoulders and his yoke from your neck, and the yoke will be broken because of fatness. He has come up against Ai. And what I'm about to read here has some place names. I don't understand the significance about that. And I'm okay saying that. Those three words that people freak out about, I don't know. Totally cool saying them. Totally cool saying them. I don't know. I don't understand this part. If you do understand this part, please talk to me. Teach me, like for real. We're supposed to be like a family. We're supposed to be able to help each other learn. He has come up against Aiath. He has passed through Migron. At Michmash he deposited his baggage. They've gone through the pass, saying, Geba will be our lodging place. Ramah is terrified, and Gibeah of Saul has fled away. Cry aloud with your voice, O daughter of Galim. Pay attention. Laishah and wretched Anatoth. Madmenah has fled. The inhabitants of Gebim have sought refuge. Yet today he will halt at Nob. He shakes his fist at the mountain of the daughter of Zion, the hill of Jerusalem. Behold, Yahweh, the God of hosts, will lop off the boughs with a terrible crash. Those also who were tall in stature will be cut down, and those who are lofty will be abased. He will cut down the thickets of the forest with an iron axe, and Lebanon will fall by the mighty one. And again, all this tree language is representative of people with power. Okay, so he's laying waste to the people in power here. He's not just going out and being Paul Bunyan out here, guys. Okay, verse 11. Or excuse me, chapter 11. My Zondervan has this headed, Righteous Reign of the Branch. Very aptly named. Let's get going. Verse 11. Then a shoot will spring from the stem of Jesse, and a branch from his roots will bear fruit. The Spirit of Yahweh will rest on him. Remember, okay, now this was quoted in the New Testament. Okay, what we're about to read here was quoted in the New Testament about Yahshua the Messiah. Then, in his first advent. But remember, the overall context of what we're looking about here is the last days. So we're getting insight into the character and the job function, if you will, of this branch. And he already started to fulfill it when he came the first time. But there's a lot more fulfilling to do, as we'll find out as we continue. The Spirit of Yahweh will rest on him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and strength, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of Yahweh. And he will delight in the fear of Yahweh. And he will not judge by what his eyes see, nor make a decision by what his ears hear. But with righteousness he will judge the poor, and decide with fairness for the afflicted of the earth. And he will strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he will slay the wicked. Also, righteousness will be the belt about his loins, and faithfulness the belt about his waist. And the wolf will dwell with the lamb, and the leopard will lie down with the young goat. And the calf and the young lion and the fatling together, and a little boy will lead them. Also the cow and the bear will graze, their young will lie down together. And the lion will eat straw like the ox. Clearly this hasn't happened. Okay? Clearly this is future. I mean, it should be really obvious. Okay? The nursing child will play by the hole of the cobra, and the weaned child will put his hand on the viper's den. They will not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain. For the earth will be full of the knowledge of Yahweh as the waters cover the sea. Then in that day, the nations will resort to the root of Jesse, who will stand as a signal for the peoples, and his resting place will be glorious. We're not done. Verse 11. Then it will happen on that day. Are you ready? Then it will happen on that day that Yahweh will again recover the second time with his hand the remnant of his people who will remain from Assyria, Egypt, Pathros, Cush, Elam, Shinar, Hamat, and from the islands of the sea. Now, if you have a map of the Middle East, take a look at it. A Bible map, obviously, is better because it's going to have these place names. What you'll see is that all of these place names are places that are adjacent to the land promised to Abraham. So if these people, if this remnant, are walking to the land, the promised land, if they're walking by foot, they're going to walk right through these regions. Okay? So they're coming from all over. But these nations are the ones right there around Israel. So this is a second Exodus where people are walking to the land. Okay? So let's continue. And he will lift up a standard for the nations, verse 12, and assemble the banished ones of Israel. The banished ones of Israel. Who is that? If you know your Bible history, you know that Israel was banished. Both the house of Israel in the north and the house of Judah in the south, they were all kicked out of the land because of their backsliding and rebellion and their refusal to keep Yahweh's commandments. They were all kicked out. They were banished. And we're banished to this day. So what he's doing here, he's going to assemble the banished ones of Israel and gather the dispersed of Judah. So we're getting into this two-house language that we're going to see more as we go. Okay? So he's bringing both houses together. I talked about that in the Good Shepherd teaching. The Good Shepherd laid down his life to bring the two folds together. You don't hear that taught in the Christian churches about Jesus. You don't, guys. Because the Jesus that's taught in the Christian churches is only about my salvation, period. That's it. Anything for my salvation, and it doesn't go beyond that. The Good Shepherd laid down his life to bring two folds together under one shepherd, in one fold. That's what we're talking about here when we talk about the house of Israel and the house of Judah. Those are the two folds. And we won't read it tonight, but when you get into Ezekiel 37, when it talks about the two sticks, for Ephraim, which is Israel, and for Judah being made together in one in his hand, in both cases it says, and their companions. So there's room for the Gentiles, the nations, to be brought in under that umbrella. Paul details it in Romans 11 very well. But it's all about Israel as a nation, being reconstituted as a nation. He will gather the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. Then the jealousy of Ephraim will depart, that's the northern kingdom, and those who harass Judah will be cut off. Ephraim will not be jealous of Judah, and Judah will not harass Ephraim. They will swoop down on the slopes of the Philistines on the west. Together they will plunder the sons of the east. They will possess Edom and Moab, and the sons of Ammon will be subject to them. And just as a short note here, based on what I just read there, The next time you're reading Daniel chapter 11, take note of where the king of the north can't go. Okay? I'm not going to elaborate on it. That's homework for the curious. Verse 15, and Yahweh will utterly destroy the tongue of the sea of Egypt, and he will wave his hand over the river with his scorching wind, and he will strike it into 7 streams, and make men walk over dry shod. Is this just some spiritual language? Is this all spiritual? No. No. If this was a spiritual concept, there are better ways to illustrate a spiritual concept than this language. This is physical, guys. This is physical. This is going to happen in the temporal. And there will be a highway from Assyria for the remnant of his people who will be left, just as there was for Israel in the day that they came up out of the land of Egypt. So there it is, connecting it again to the first Exodus. All right? Let's go another 6 verses. Let's finish. Let's do chapter 12. Then you will say on that day, I will give thanks to you, O Yahweh. For although you were angry with me, this is Israel talking, your anger has turned away, and you comfort me. Behold, God, or Elohim in your Hebrew, is my salvation. I will trust and not be afraid. For Yahweh God, this is interesting. I would need to look at this in the Hebrew. I haven't caught this before. In my English here, Lord and God are both all caps. Now normally, all caps means Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh. So this is, I'm making a mental note to check this out later. If this is how we would normally read it, it would be Yahweh Yahweh in the Hebrew, which is really interesting. Like why would the Tetragrammaton be there twice in a row? For the Lord God, or perhaps Yahweh Yahweh, is my strength and song, and he has become my salvation. Whose salvation? Israel's salvation. Because we read all through the prophets about Yahweh's salvation extending to the ends of the earth. Why does his salvation need to extend to the ends of the earth? Because that's where his people are. He's saving them from the nations. He's saving them from captivity. When you look in your Old Testament and you look at that word salvation, that's almost always what it means. It's almost never about personal salvation, specifically spiritual salvation. It's almost always saving his people from the captivity. Verse 3, therefore you will joyously draw water from the springs of salvation, and in that day you will say, give thanks to Yahweh, call on his name. Now, I have to make this point, okay? I'm not a sacred namer. And what do I mean by that? Sacred namers typically, it's an umbrella term, there's some nuance to it. Sacred namers are people that believe that pronouncing and vocalizing the name of the Creator is of the utmost importance, specifically doing it right. And people who don't do that are basically heathen. Okay? And they will place a salvific power to this. So like, basically, if you don't call Yahweh by whatever his name is, Yahweh, Yahuwah, Jehovah, whatever, you don't have salvation. There are people that believe that. I'm not one of them. But at the same time, I do believe that the name of Yahweh is sacred. I believe that his name, he gave his name to Moses, and he said it's his memorial name through all generations. It's clearly important to him. So, how do you call on the name of someone without vocalizing their name? If somebody is outside my truck right now calling on my name, I'm not going to have any idea unless they actually say James. You know, like, it's just a basic point of logic. But yet, in the preface to my Zondervan here, they come out and say, oh yeah, we know his name is Yahweh, Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh, yeah, we know he said that's his name, but we're just going to go with the Lord and God for the sacred tradition. That's what I tell people. Holiness is having something important to us because it's important to him. His name may not be important to you if you're watching this, whoever's watching this, but I guarantee you it's important to him. Anyway, give thanks to Yahweh, call on his name. Make known his deeds among the peoples. Make them remember that his name is exalted. Verse 5. Praise Yahweh in song, for he has done excellent things. Let this be known throughout the earth. Cry aloud and shout for joy, O inhabitant of Zion, for great in your midst is the Holy One of Israel. Now, I didn't have to read chapter 12, but I wanted to, because it's awesome. Okay? All right. So now we're going to go to Jeremiah chapter 23. Jeremiah chapter 23. I like reading stuff in order. Okay? And, you know, there are a lot of us out there who have this drive and this fire to teach the word of Yahweh. Okay? I have a lot of brothers out there who have the same fire in their spirit as I do. One thing that I've learned over the months of teaching the word of Yahweh to people in person is the predominant feedback I get is when you go cover to cover and you go through the concept, Genesis to Revelation, in order, line upon line, precept upon precept, people's eyes open. The light bulb goes off. They see things they haven't seen before. Because normally the way it's done is we skip around, or we isolate verses here and there to make a point. You know? When you go cover to cover and you try to extract all the information out in the order that it's given to us, and you pull in all the context, it paints a much more vivid picture that people can understand. So, you know, hopefully that's useful for some people out there, you know. I'm no great teacher, I'm no Brad Scott, you know, but it's like, you know, I'm getting positive feedback. So, you know, and it's the word, it's not me, but it's just how the word is presented. Okay, so for whoever, whatever that's worth. Anyway, so we're gonna continue that theme here. If I wanted to do the way I wanted to do it instinctively was to start here. And the reason I wanted to start here is because this is the bridge between the Good Shepherd concept and the branch concept. So it makes sense to start with this coming off the Good Shepherd. But I'm going to stick with my pattern and go in order. Okay? So Jeremiah chapter 23. My Zondervan says, the coming Messiah, the righteous branch. Woe to the shepherds who are destroying and scattering the sheep of my pasture, declares Yahweh. Therefore, thus says Yahweh, God of Israel, concerning the shepherds who are tending my people. You have scattered my flock and driven them away, and have not attended to them. Behold, I am about to attend to you for the evil of your deeds, declares Yahweh. Then I myself will gather the remnant of my flock out of all the countries where I have driven them, and bring them back to their pasture, and they will be fruitful and multiply. He's talking about this Good Shepherd thing. He's talking about bringing the two folds back together. I will also raise up shepherds over them, and they will tend them, and they will not be afraid any longer, nor be terrified, nor will any be missing, declares Yahweh. Behold, the days are coming, declares Yahweh, when I will raise up for David a righteous branch, and he will reign as king and act wisely, and do justice and righteousness in the land. Where? In heaven? No, it says very plainly, in the land. In his days, Judah will be saved, and Israel will dwell securely. Now, if he's only talking about, you know, the Jews or whatever, he could have just said Judah. He names Judah and Israel specifically for a reason. It's this two-house language. It's the two folds. And this is his name by which he will be called, Yahweh our righteousness. Now we know that Israel's not dwelling securely. We know that. There hasn't been peace in the actual land of Israel ever. There was a little bit of reprieve under Solomon, but pretty much since then, nothing. And if we extrapolate Israel to the place places where his people have been exiled to, there's no peace there either. Therefore, behold, days are coming, declares Yahweh, when they will no longer say, as Yahweh lives, who brought up the sons of Israel from the land of Egypt, but as Yahweh lives, who brought up and led back the descendants of the household of Israel from the northland and from all the countries where I had driven them. Then they will live on their own soil. So I have to just pause a moment here. People will watch this and let me just rip the Band-Aid off, okay? There is a movement, and I've talked about this before. There is a movement of folks who believe that the ancient Israelites were African, okay? That they came out of Africa. And this is being taught and it's spread. When you look historically, where was the nexus of everything in your Bible? You know, once they came out of Egypt, it was all there in the Levant, in what we would call Israel. Okay? Now, historically, that area has been considered part of Egypt, and it has been considered part of Africa because it's sort of like a land bridge area between Asia and Africa, if you include the Sinai Peninsula there. Okay? But where are these people coming back from? They're coming back from the north. These people are coming from the north. Africa's not north of Israel. What is? Europe? Turkey, Asia Minor, Russia? If I just take a line of latitude and go all around the globe, you have North America too. Okay? Now, I could make the argument that if the Hebrews were black, they're clearly scattered through these northern countries at this point because of slavery. That's a fact. So geographically, they have a high representation in the northern countries. Now, what I personally think is we passed the point long ago where being of Israel or being of Judah is about our skin color or our DNA. It's faith. It always has been. So, when he talks about Israel coming out of the north, I don't visualize this as a bunch of white people coming into Israel from Europe. What I envision this is a bunch of believers of any color from those regions, because if you think about it, where did the gospel go? When you read your Bible or canonized scripture, where do we see it going? You know? We know that Peter ended up going out towards Babylon. Some people will say that's Rome, but it says Babylon in the text. He could have just said Rome. They don't have any problem saying Rome anywhere else in the Bible. You know, when you look at the apocryphal stories of the disciples, who we don't know if it's true or not, you know, they went to India, they went out, you know, to points east, they went down into Africa, they went all around. Where did Paul go? Paul was supposed to be like the apostle to the Gentiles. Where did he go? He went to Europe. So the Europeans, meaning people in Europe, not necessarily white people per se, because the Roman Empire was like America today. They had people from all types of races. The people there embraced the message. And of course we know not too long after it became corrupted. But initially, they're the ones that embraced the gospel. That's where Christianity comes from. Okay? So if we're honest with ourselves, the gospel, what we consider the gospel, the words of this book, were taken to the world by people from Europe. So it's a geographic thing. I don't think it has to be a racial thing. But I know that there are people that will watch this that are probably squirming in their seats, thinking, oh, he's talking about, you know, from the north, da-da-da-da-da, and he's ignoring da-da-da. Please. Okay, we're cool. It's all good, you know? Like, everybody has an opportunity to get in. We are way past when it was our genes. Way past that. That was like a couple generations. Even back in David's day, you could graft in. I mean, his grandma was a Moabite. You know? It's not about race. And that's why it grieves me in my spirit to see people who make it about race. You know, like, oh, we're Israel. We're from Africa. We're Israel. Okay? Now, I do believe, I didn't mean to make this a big sidebar, I do believe that the original Hebrews were dark-skinned. I don't believe that they were African dark-skinned, but I do think that they were Mediterranean, you know, Middle East type dark skin, brown. I don't know what shade. I don't really care what shade. You know? I don't think that they were, you know, blonde hair, blue-eyed Europeans. I don't think they looked like the Jesus that's on everybody's wall. For what it's worth. Anyway, so when I talk about all these places that they're coming from, and I emphasize the geography, I emphasize the places that they're coming from in the north, that's to say the Christian nations. That's the simple way to say it. Anyway, okay, so I could keep reading there, but oh no, I didn't finish. As Yahweh lives, who brought up and led back the descendants of the household of Israel from the northland and from all the countries where I had driven them, then they will live on their own soil. So this is a temporal promise, okay? This connects squarely back to the covenant made with Abraham. Right back to it. Okay, so and it's interesting because the rest of this chapter is a big discourse on false prophets. So I just find it interesting that he kind of lumps the concepts together. You're going to have, you know, you've got these bad shepherds. He's going to have to do it himself. You've got this servant of David, this branch of David that's going to come on the scene. This is all last days. And then you've got all these false prophets to deal with. Okay, so now let's go to Jeremiah 33. Now, we're going to skip over the New Covenant. New Covenant is with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. It's not with the Gentiles. It's not. It's not with the Gentile church. It's with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. It's in your Bible, black and white, and when it's quoted in the book of Hebrews, it reads exactly the same. So, Jeremiah 33, we're going to read the first 18 verses. Told you guys we're going to do a lot of reading, and this is going to be long. Hopefully, people are okay with that. Then the word of Yahweh came to Jeremiah the second time, while he was still confined in the court of the guard, saying, Thus says Yahweh who made the earth, Yahweh who formed it to establish it. Yahweh is his name. Call to me. Am I in the right spot? Yeah, okay, sorry. Call to me, and I will answer you, and I will tell you the great and mighty things which you do not know. For thus says Yahweh, God of Israel, concerning the houses of this city, and concerning the houses of the kings of Judah, which are broken down to make a defense against the siege ramps and against the sword. While they are coming to fight with the Chaldeans, to fill them with the corpses of men, whom I have slain in my anger and in my wrath, and I have hidden my face from this city because of all their wickedness, behold, I will bring to it health and healing, and I will heal them, and I will reveal to them an abundance of peace and truth. I will restore the fortunes of Judah and the fortunes of Israel, and will rebuild them as they were at first. Now I'm going to pause a moment here, and I'm going to say two things. First off is we have this Judah and Israel language again. Okay? Again. He's going to heal. He's going to restore the fortunes of Judah and the fortunes of Israel. This is what he says pertaining to his servant in Isaiah 49. The job of the servant is to restore Israel. Now, if the servant is Israel, that doesn't make sense, because the servant is acting upon Israel. So for the anti-missionary, counter-missionary, Tobias Singer, Scott Shub, whoever out there, that insists that all those servant chapters are talking about the nation of Israel, it doesn't make sense, because the servant is acting upon Israel. Second point is that he will rebuild them as they were at first. So what he's talking about here is this unified kingdom that they had at the beginning. They weren't always the house of Israel and the house of Judah. That happened after Solomon died, under the reign of his son Rehoboam. Now, it's interesting, I won't read it here, but when you get into Hosea, Hosea prophesies in the last days, in that context, that every man will, and I'm paraphrasing, every man will sit under his own vine and under his own fig tree. There are software programs that let you do searches for phrases. I use Blue Letter Bible. The only other time that phrase comes up like that is talking about during the reign of King Solomon, when the kingdom was unified, and every man sat under his own vine and his own fig tree. So we're being restored back to that point. Now, a lot of people think it's going to ultimately be restored back to the Garden of Eden. I don't see that in scriptures. I see everything being a restoration of the kingdom that was unified. And I see a unified kingdom of Israel as the ultimate fulfillment of the promise made to Abraham. But this kingdom is going to be fulfilled with people who died in faith and obedience and were resurrected to glory. Because that land was promised to him and his descendants as an everlasting possession. You can't possess something forever unless you live forever. So, anyway, let's keep going. Verse 8, I will cleanse them from all their iniquity by which they have sinned against me, and I will pardon all their iniquities by which they have sinned against me, and by which they have transgressed against me. It's an Old Testament concept. It's not just like Jesus comes along in the New Testament and it's like, hey guys, I'm going to die for you to forgive your sins. This idea of forgiveness of sins goes way back. And notice how there's no mention of animal sacrifices here. There's no mention of the Levites or the temple or the tabernacle. It's based on his righteousness, his mercy, and it's based on us being considered Israel. You don't get to be called Israel unless you follow and worship the God of Israel, his way. Verse 9, it will be to me a name of joy, praise, and glory before all the nations of the earth, which will hear of all the good that I do for them, and they will fear and tremble because of all the good and all the peace that I will make for it. Thus says Yahweh, yet again there will be heard in this place of which you say, it's a waste, without man and without beast. That is, in the cities of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem that are desolate, without man and without inhabitant and without beast. The voice of joy and the voice of gladness, the voice of the bridegroom and the voice of the bride, the voice of those who say, give thanks to Yahweh of hosts, for Yahweh is good, for his loving kindness is everlasting. And of those who bring a thank offering from the house of Yahweh, or into the house of Yahweh. Whoa, hang on a second. Let's pause a moment here. This is last days language. And you have people bringing thanksgiving offerings into the temple of Yahweh, or the house of Yahweh. We're not supposed to be doing that now that Jesus is on the scene, are we? Right? That's what we're taught. We're taught that since he came, the sacrificial system is completely done. You can't do sacrifices at all, period, or you're denying the blood that bought you. Now notice he's not saying a sin offering here. He's talking about a thank offering. Hey, I got this awesome new job. I'm going to go to the house of Yahweh and give him a thank you. I'm going to offer a sacrifice of thanks to him. So this is going to be happening. For I will restore the fortunes of the land as they were at first, says Yahweh. At first. Thus says Yahweh of hosts, verse 12, there will be again in this place, which is waste, without man or beast, and in all its cities, a habitation of shepherds who rest their flocks. In the cities of the hill country, in the cities of the lowland, in the cities of the Negev, in the land of Benjamin, in the environs of Jerusalem, and in the cities of Judah, the flocks will again pass under the hands of the one who numbers them, says Yahweh. I'm going to pause a moment and get a sip of hot tea here. Okay, verse 14. Behold, days are coming, declares Yahweh, when I will fulfill the good word which I have spoken concerning the house of Israel and the house of Judah. Now, I want to pause a moment here, okay? I talked last night about Matthew 5, starting in verse 18, I believe. To think not. Think not that I came to abolish the law or the prophets. I didn't come to abolish, but to fulfill. What does he mean by that? This. Okay? These are words in the prophets that he came to fulfill. Now, he didn't say he's going to fulfill it all in one shot, but he had to come on the scene to start the process. Okay? Days are coming, declares Yahweh, when I will fulfill the good word which I have spoken concerning the house of Israel and the house of Judah. No mention of the Gentiles yet again. In those days and at that time, I will cause a righteous branch of David to spring forth, and he shall execute justice and righteousness on the earth. In those days, Judah will be saved, and Jerusalem will dwell in safety. So the Jews are finally going to be saved, right? But not in the way that Christians think. And Jerusalem will dwell in safety, and this is the name by which she will be called, Yahweh is our righteousness. For thus says Yahweh, David shall never lack a man to sit on the throne of the house of Israel, and the Levitical priest shall never lack a man before me to offer burnt offerings, to burn grain offerings, and to prepare sacrifices continually. So for the time being, yes, there's no tabernacle, there's no temple. There's no Levitical priesthood functioning right now. We have the priesthood of Melchizedek right now, the higher priesthood. But there will be a time when the branch comes on the scene, when the Levites will get fired back up and the thing will start over again. You will have these offerings in the house of Yahweh once again. Now notice again, no mention of sin offerings here. These are like people get in their heads that all the animal sacrifices done in the temple were about sin. So when Christ died, we don't do sacrifices anymore because of that. You have Thanksgiving offerings, peace offerings, you have grain offerings, you have the whole burnt offerings, you have all the daily offerings, you have the offerings that were offered on the high days. Not all of these are sin offerings. Most of them are not. You only need to offer a sin offering when you sin. So, if you really are against sin offerings, and the temple or tabernacle gets reestablished, the best way to protest is to not sin, right? Okay. So, did I read as far as I wanted to go there? Yeah, okay. So now we're going to go into the book of Zechariah. We have 2 more chapters to read here, and then we're done. Zechariah. Now, Zechariah, I went right past him. Zechariah was prophesying during the time of the rebuilding of the temple when Ezra, Nehemiah, and Zerubbabel were on the scene. You also had a high priest in charge named Joshua. Now, quick little, I'm a homeschool dad, so we're going to have a homeschool education moment here. Joshua. There's a document that we have called the Septuagint. It is the Greek translation of the Old Testament that was written before Christ came. Okay? Now, when you go to look at the word Joshua in the Greek, you will see the name Jesus, the same as you see in the Greek New Testament for Jesus. Okay? So, but yet here we are in 2022, calling one of them Jesus and calling the other one Joshua. Okay? So, you take that same document and you go in the Old Testament Hebrew, where it says Joshua, and you look in the Hebrew. And it's got 5 letters. Yod, He, Wah, Shin, Ayin. The best I can tell, that's pronounced Yahshua. There might be some nuance to it, but it makes sense to me. Okay? So if we're going to be consistent, like really consistent, Joshua and Jesus, we should be calling both of them Yahshua. Because that's where it comes from the Hebrew. Like Christ's parents were not, Joseph and Mary Christ. They weren't they weren't Americans. They weren't even Greeks. They were Hebrews. They spoke Hebrew. They're not going to give their kid a name that means nothing in the Hebrew language or any known language at that time. If they wanted to give him a Greek name, they could have named him Jesus, but they didn't. So why can't we just suck it up and just admit, hey, We've been calling him by the wrong name all this time. If we honor him and respect him that much, don't we owe it to him to get his name right? At least try? But we're just going to cling to these traditions and keep calling him Jesus, when it was never his name. Any Bible scholar worth their salt knows that it was never his name, but yet they keep calling it from the pulpits. It's time to grow up, guys. We've got to do better. We've got to do better. Zechariah chapter 3. Fire in my bones. Sorry, guys. It's a little warm in here, too. So my air conditioner is cranking, but it's hot here where I'm at. So, okay, so this is interesting, and this ties in. Okay, I mentioned Joshua. So I'm going to read one chapter here. Then he showed me Joshua, or Yahshua, the high priest, standing before the angel of Yahweh, and Satan standing at his right hand to accuse him. Now this is a scene in heaven. Okay? Joshua, the high priest, is there. I don't know how, but he's there. Probably in the spirit, like John of Patmos was. Because we know flesh and blood can't enter heaven. But who else is there with him? This guy we call Satan is there with him in heaven before the Father. So this idea that Satan was kicked out of heaven eons ago because he rose up in rebellion against God, and he's just been sulking and, moaning and groaning here on earth, trying to corrupt poor souls ever since. It's not in our Bibles. It's really not. And we see in Revelation 12, which has not been fulfilled yet, it's clearly future, he's still in heaven. So Satan has access to go to heaven. We see it in the book of Job too. He was standing at his right hand to accuse him. He's going to accuse Joshua. Yahweh said to Satan, Yahweh rebuke you, Satan. Now, this is really interesting. Let's think about this. Yahweh just spoke in third person, right? Yahweh said, Yahweh rebuke you. He just spoke in third person. Why would he need to speak in third person? There's only two ways I could interpret this. Either A, he's speaking in third person, which is weird, or B, one Yahweh is speaking of another Yahweh. Maybe that's why we had Yahweh, Yahweh back earlier. I don't know. Interesting. Yahweh rebuke you, Satan. Indeed, Yahweh who has chosen Jerusalem rebuke you. Is this not a brand plucked from the fire? Now Joshua, or Yahshua, was clothed with filthy garments and standing before the angel. He spoke and said to those who were standing before him, saying, Remove the filthy garments from him. Again he said to him, See, I have taken your iniquity away from you and will clothe you with festal robes. Now how do we know that this is not Yahshua, as in the son of Yahweh? Because he doesn't have any iniquity to take away. This is not looking at forward to like Yahshua in his role as like the high priest under Melchizedek or anything like that. This is the high priest Joshua, who was the high priest at the time this was prophesied. Okay? But we'll see later, he's being used as a type and a symbol to show us something. So let's see what we're being shown. Verse 5, Then I said, Let them put a clean, this is Zechariah talking. Then I said, Let them put a clean turban on his head. So they put a clean turban on his head and clothed him with garments, while the angel of Yahweh was standing by. And the angel of Yahweh admonished Joshua, or Yahshua, saying, Thus says Yahweh of hosts. He's going to put a condition on this. If you will walk in my ways, and if you will perform my service, then you will also govern my house, and also have charge of my courts, and I will grant you free access among those who are standing here. Now, let's think about this here. Okay? Joshua was a high priest. He is the intermediary between the people and Yahweh. That's the high priest job. It's any priest job, really. Okay? He's talking about, if you will perform my service, in other words, do your duties as priest, then you will also govern my house and have charge of my courts. That's the kind of thing a king does. And we'll see this fleshed out here in a minute. And he will grant him free access among those who are standing here. So he's just going to let him come and go up there in heaven. Like, that's a pretty awesome thing. But what's it predicated on? obedience, right? Verse 8. Now listen, Yahshua the high priest, you and your friends who are sitting in front of you. So the way I process this visually, okay, and I could be wrong on this. On earth, Yahshua the high priest is in a room with his friends. He's taken in the spirit to heaven, like John of Patmos was, and he's interacting with the people there in heaven. Okay? So his body's in one place, his spirit's in another place, just like John of Patmos. Okay? Indeed, they are men who are a symbol. For behold, I am going to bring in my servant, the branch. So, pause a moment. If you are Zechariah, and you know the words of the prophets that came before you, you know what Isaiah said, you know what Jeremiah said. I will bring in my servant, the branch. Your brain's going to be like, oh, that's going to happen. So it's not like the branch is a new concept here. This is, this person I've been talking about for all this time, that I'm going to bring him in. So Zechariah would have known exactly what that means. And anybody who studies the Tanakh, the Older Testament, with any kind of degree of seriousness should also be able to connect those same dots. But yet, I go on YouTube and can't find anything on this. Nothing. I mean, maybe it comes up for you, but it doesn't come up for me. For behold, the stone I have set before Joshua, or Yahshua. On one stone are 7 eyes. Where have we heard about 7 eyes? You go to Revelation. The Lamb that that sits on the throne. The Lamb has 7 eyes. Interesting. Behold, I will engrave on it an inscription, declares Yahweh of hosts, and I will remove the iniquity of the land in one day. In that day, declares Yahweh of hosts, every one of you will invite his neighbor to sit under his vine and under his fig tree. I forgot that was there. When I mentioned this earlier, I had the scripture in Hosea. It says it here too. So this is in the context of the end times, the last days, the day of Yahweh. And he's talking about bringing in his servant, the branch. He doesn't say here, and then he's going to do, no. Because you already know what the servant is, you already know what the branch is going to do, because you read Isaiah and you read Jeremiah. So Zechariah knows exactly what this servant is going to do because he knows his Bible. And so it's interesting too, he makes the connection to the Lamb in Revelation. He's about to make in the next chapter a connection to the 2 witnesses in Revelation 11. And in this whole context of talking about this high priest who will have access to the heavens with a group of friends, sounds a little bit to me like Yahshua and his disciples, functionally. I mean, how convenient that this priest is named Yahshua when he's talking about revealing the branch. Like, the first time I really read this, to me the way it read was, oh my goodness, he's actually telling us the name of the branch in code. Now, would I believe that if I didn't already believe the branch was named Yahshua? I don't know. It could be confirmation bias, and I'm honest about that. Maybe it is. What if it isn't? Zechariah chapter 6. We'll finish up here. Now we're going to get this whole thing is part of a category of literature that they call apocalyptic literature. Okay, so like Zechariah, parts of Daniel, pretty much all of Revelation, you have these weird, zany visions of weird animals and just crazy stuff. And it's meant to show things that are going to happen in the future in symbolic format. Okay, so we're going to read some weird stuff here. As I read here, some of this should take you to Revelation. Okay, it just should. I mean, I shouldn't have to say that, but in case you've had a long day, you're tired, your mind's a little sluggish, maybe you need a reminder, think Revelation as I read this. Now I lifted up my eyes again and looked, and behold, 4 chariots were coming forth from between the 2 mountains. These are the bronze mountains. And the mountains were bronze mountains. With the first chariot were red horses, With the second chariot, black horses. With the third chariot, white horses. And with the fourth chariot, strong, dappled horses. This sounds a lot like Revelation 6 with the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Only difference is that fourth horse in Revelation is like a green or ashen, pale horse. This one's a dappled horse. A little different, you know. It could be a translational difference. I don't know. Then I spoke, verse 4, and said to the angel who was speaking with me, "What are these, my master?" The angel replied to me, "These are the 4 spirits of heaven, going forth after standing before the Lord of all the earth, with one of which the black horses are going forth to the north country." Okay, I'm going to slow down and break this up. Okay, so the next time you read Revelation and you read about those horses, think of this. And I'm not saying that I'm connecting these dots correctly. I'm just saying let's take a look at them and see if they even need to be connected. Maybe they do. Okay, so this black horse, the black horses are going forth to the north country. What did we read about the north country earlier? That's the primary place Yahweh is going to call his people back from in the last days. Also other places, the islands of the earth, etc., but primarily the northern countries. What's the black horse in Revelation? Death, right? Famine, pestilence. Okay, so that horse is going to the north country. The white ones go forth after them. So the white horse at the beginning of Revelation, if these are connected, is also going to the north country. While the dappled ones go forth to the south country. South country. So whatever this dappled horse is, in Revelation, that's the ashen horse. Okay, so that's going forth to the south country. When the strong ones went out, now, I don't see mention, unless I just read over it here, I don't see mention of the red horse here, which is really interesting. When the strong ones went out, they were eager to go to patrol the earth. And he said, "Go patrol the earth." So they patrolled the earth. Then he cried out to me and spoke to me, saying, "See, those who are going to the land of the north have appeased my wrath in the land of the north." Why would his wrath need to be appeased in the land of the north? Because that's where his people are largely concentrated, who should know better, but we're the ones that are corrupting the whole world. Like, for real. You know? Like, pretty much anything evil and wicked you could toss upon the world has come from Europe, America, Russia, the European Christian nations. The very people that should know better. Okay. The word of Yahweh also came to me, saying, "Take an offering from the exiles, from Heldai, Tobiah, and Jediah. And you go the same day and enter the house of Josiah, the son of Zephaniah, where they have arrived from Babylon." Now let's keep reading here. Am I in the right place? Zechariah 6? Yes, okay. "Take silver and gold," verse 11. "Make an ornate crown and set it on the head of Joshua, the son of Jehozadak, the high priest. Then say to him, Thus says Yahweh of hosts, Behold, a man whose name is Branch, for he will branch out from where he is, and he will build the temple of Yahweh." I want to pause right here. There was a controversy in the 1800s when you had Theodore Herschel and you had the Zionists who wanted to move to the land of Israel and establish it as a homeland for the Jews. Okay? I don't know a ton of the history. A lot of you probably know more than I do. But as I understand it, there was kind of a schism between the Jews of that day because most of the Jews, especially the Orthodox, knew scriptures like this. Who's supposed to build the temple? The branch is supposed to build the temple. Well, the branch is the Messiah. The branch is supposed to be the one doing all this stuff. The shepherd is supposed to be the one bringing the people into the land. What are we doing taking it upon ourselves to do his job? So a lot of Jews at that time were not, probably most of them, were not on board with like the first Zionist Congress. They just weren't. To this day, most Jews in America don't support building another temple. They don't support anything like that. Why do they need a homeland in Israel when they have posh houses here in America? You know? Anyway, so the branch will build the temple of Yahweh. Yes, it is he who will build the temple of Yahweh. and he who will bear the honor and sit and rule on his throne. This is not the second temple, because the branch never sat and ruled on that throne in that temple. This is a coming temple, like it or not. Thus he will be a priest on his throne, and the council of peace will be between the two offices. Okay, so the priesthood of Melchizedek, that's a priest king, right? Melchizedek, when Abraham went to him, he was the king of Salem, but he was also the priest of the Most High. He was a king and a priest. That's what the order of Melchizedek represents. Okay, so he's basically going to unify these offices. Now the crown will be a reminder in the temple of Yahweh. This temple hasn't been made yet, guys. So this is I don't quite understand why he's mentioning specific people here. But either way, it's clear to me this is a coming temple relative to today. Now the crown will become a reminder in the temple of Yahweh to Helem, Tobiah, Jedaiah, and Hen, the son of Zephaniah. Those who are far off will come and build the temple of Yahweh. Okay? So it just said that the branch was going to be the one to build the temple of Yahweh. Now it's saying the ones who are far off. What does this mean? Who built the temple? The first temple. Your Bible says several times Solomon built it. Was Solomon out there as the only guy that was building the temple? No. He was in charge of the project. Other hands built the temple. Same thing here. Then you will know that Yahweh of hosts has sent me to you. And it will take place if you completely obey Yahweh your Elohim. So, my Christian Zionist friends out there who are funding the Temple Institute, the Sanhedrin, all of these organizations, because you want the temple to be rebuilt, maybe we should second guess that. Okay? Because it's clear here, if this is that temple, if this is the next temple that's going to come at the end of the age, we're not going to get that temple until we as a people are completely obeying Yahweh. The only way that's going to happen, per Ezekiel 11, is if we have a new heart and a new spirit. When we look at the context of Ezekiel 11, and if we couple that with the context of Ezekiel 36, where that's also mentioned, we're not there yet. We're not there yet. So, the branch is another aspect of what the Messiah is supposed to do. And in my opinion, this aspect is not taught anywhere near enough in the churches or the synagogues. The best I can tell, at least going from YouTube anecdotally. I didn't find any Jewish content either. You know, so it's not like the Jews are out there putting up all this content on YouTube talking about this, like they talk about everything else. It's not like, you know, the Jews are silent on YouTube. They have all kinds of content. You know, but there's crickets. There's crickets. So, to tease a couple things here, I'm done with this study, so appreciate you tuning in live or later. Just a couple of things that are coming up. I am parked where I'm at pretty much most of the day tomorrow. I have a late day tomorrow, meaning my appointment is late in the afternoon, so I'm sitting here. Okay, so my plan for tomorrow is I've got a study on what I call the Galatians 3 gospel. Okay, I've presented this twice in the past year. I did it once out at Yahweh's Friestown Assembly out in Bethel, Friestown, Yahweh's Free Brethren Assembly. They changed their name. It was a smaller version of it, but I did it out there like last April or something last year. With our local group, I did it earlier this year, like I mentioned. And to me, it's such an important topic that I really wanted to do it justice. So what I did was I created a PowerPoint presentation with slides and everything to actually do a proper presentation of it. You know, besides just sitting in the back of my pickup, not my pickup, my big rig here, just talking about it. So my aim with that, and I'll still do it, is to get set up in my garage. I have a decent camera and do a proper, you know, serious presentation on that. And that'll go up on YouTube. It'll also go up on Odyssey. Okay, and I'll break that up into parts that are easy to watch, 20-minute parts or whatever, because it's going to be long. But I've been chomping at the bit to present that forever to like the larger group. Okay, so I'm gonna try to do that tomorrow here from the truck. I've got my PowerPoint over here. I'll just have up for reference, but I'll do the presentation here into my phone like I'm doing now. It'll be one long thing. But I want to get that out there for anybody who might be interested, because to me it's a complete game changer. Second thing is, in this same vein of kind of digging into these aspects of Messiah and his mission and who he is that aren't so apparent from what we've been taught over the years, I was asked to, this coming month in August, the group that meets regionally, we get together on the first Sabbath of the month. I was asked to do kind of a deep dive on the idea of the arm of Yahweh, or like the right hand of Yahweh. Because when that phrase comes up, there are cases where it applies to the Messiah. And so I'm gonna take them up on that, and I'm gonna do a deep dive into that aspect of Messiah, like what exactly that means. And hopefully we'll all learn something from that. I know for me personally, I will, because it's something I've never studied before, and this is why I love having community where we can challenge each other, especially those who are teaching, and when you're teaching, it's really easy to hone in on pet subjects, things that excite you, things that you feel like you were pretty knowledgeable about, and just focus on those. But then you're not learning and growing. So when you have other teachers suggest, hey, maybe you should take a look at this, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll do it. I'll take a look at that. And I just kind of, I feel like if more of us could work together that way, we could learn a lot more from each other, So anyway, so I'm excited about that. I'm actually probably going to start working on that study when I close here in a minute. Or I might go to bed depending on whatever time it is. So anyway, thank you guys for tuning in. As always, I appreciate your time. I know that, these are not the easiest thing to sit through. Sometimes the audio is kind of rough. I'm in a truck with a bunch of moving parts. Even when I'm parked, there's stuff running. The audio's not always great. The video's definitely not great right now. But I still have, a nucleus of people that tune into these regularly. So I'm hoping that it's a blessing to people. And if you have any feedback, whether it's positive, whether it's negative, whether it's just minute stuff or whatever, like tips and things, please feel free to let me know. Because I don't know where everybody's at, like with your situation where you can watch this kind of stuff. I don't know where everybody's at as far as like your understanding of things. So sometimes I take certain things for granted, and if I just gloss over something and you're sitting there scratching your head like, wait a minute, what did he just say? Feel free to reach out to me, okay? I'm not gonna do anything but love on you. Okay? So I love you guys. I hope you guys have an awesome evening. I hope you guys get the restful sleep tonight. That's always important. And yeah, as always, I hope Yahweh blesses you. Good night.